Hey everyone, I'm Ashleigh Banfield and this is Drop Dead Serious. Thank you so much for being here. I don't say this enough, but thank you for subscribing and thank you to the members. You guys are amazing. If you haven't joined, join our membership. We do lots of fun events and it's just exclusive for members. I've got a big update on Elena Moore. It's a story that I've been following for a couple of weeks now that I just can't get it out of my craw. It's weird. It doesn't make sense. I was expecting that once her autopsy was completed last weekend, we'd have answers. Instead, we got bigger questions. And questions that certain people are better at sleuthing than I, because in a death investigation, when you have a very healthy 39-year-old personal trainer as a victim, they're not supposed to just die. They're not supposed to just fall down and die in some location near a bridge. Usually there's something that precipitates that, like, I don't know, a murder, or maybe a suicide, or maybe an accidental overdose or something like that. And so far, the answers from the coroner are not getting us closer to that solution. So just to back it up, Elena Moore is this South Carolina woman from Lexington who vanished mysteriously after signing into a Planet Fitness. And then all sorts of weird clues started coming in. Like her husband reported her missing, but it wasn't until the next day that he reported her missing. Okay, we'll leave that aside for a moment. A week before she went missing, she's seen behaving very strangely on doorbell camera video where she's grabbing someone else's DoorDash order and then kind of like making her way inside their apartment until it gets awkward and they close the door. And then she goes off and she's seen rifling through the neighbor's packages. And when asked, what are you doing? The only answer she can come up with is, I don't know. We have come across some audio, and it's EMS audio from that very same time as this strange DoorDash behavior on June 4th, a week before Elena Moore goes missing on June 11th, right? So you got June 4th, weird DoorDash, strange EMS audio I'm about to play for you. And on June 11th, she's last seen, she's reported missing June 12th, her body turns up on June 17th. A full 6 days after she was last seen at the Planet Fitness. So let's go back to the EMS audio. To be clear, I do not know if the woman they're referring to in this emergency audio dispatch is Elena Moore. All I can say is that it is about a 30-year-old-ish woman who police and EMS are talking about. It is just after the DoorDash weird incidents with those neighbors who don't live far from the Planet Fitness. And they're talking about a young woman who is possibly suicidal. So a couple of clues I want you to know about when you hear this audio, okay? So they talk about a signal 12. And in this particular jurisdiction, signal 12 is actually different in a lot of jurisdictions. It can mean a lot of different things. But in this jurisdiction, it means suicidal. They're also talking about a heaviness on paranoia in this woman who's 30-ish years old. And they talk about it being non-emergency, but that she's responding to internal stimuli. We've got some expert analysis on what that means. Effectively, it usually means they're having delusions, they're imagining something, or they are responding to something that hurts on the inside that's not immediately obvious on the outside. So I want to play this audio for you so that you can listen through the dispatch of this woman that they're calling in about, and clearly they are going to take her to the hospital. Effectively, it sounds like the police officers are trying to calm her down in a cab. I can't tell you if that's a taxi cab or the cab of a police cruiser or the cab of an ambulance. I'm not sure what their lingo means. I just know what we hear. And again, I don't know for sure that this is Elena. It's just very curiously close to that very strange incident in which that neighbor caught her on doorbell cam. And there she was with the DoorDash order, trying to walk right into that woman's door. Okay, have a listen.
Working on Lexington, Medic 22.
Medic 22, this is Lexington.
Lexington 22. We're heading down to your facility. Non-emergent this time with an approximately 30-year-old female. Chief complaint tonight is going to be signal 12 with a heavy emphasis on paranoia. Vitals are within normal limits. Negative SI or AI, but patient has been observed reacting to internal stimuli. We have about a 10-minute ETA.
You have some vital signs for me?
I apologize. I had you turned down. What was your last?
Do you have vital signs on this patient?
Negative right now. I'm having a call from the cab while they're keeping her calm.
10-4, Lexington clear.
So we reached out to Lexington County to ask about this, but they have not responded to us yet. And quite frankly, even if they do, it's really, really hard with HIPAA laws to get any confirmation that that's Elena. So that's all I can go on, is that we found this audio. It's dispatched from Lexington Medical Center, and that it is about a 30-some-odd-year-old woman right after a very strange incident that wasn't far away. So with that said, it's important to know the timeline on all of this, right? Because the autopsy results are not helpful. June 4th, weird stuff happening on the DoorDash camera. Right after that, there's an EMS call, right? For a woman who's disoriented, paranoia, possibly suicidal, off to the hospital. Then on June 11th, Elena Moore is actually released from a psychiatric facility, mental health facility, June 11th. She's put into a cab. Don't even get me started on this. Why is a woman who's been in a psychiatric facility released into a taxi cab? I mean, I've got issues with this. However, that's what happened. And she was given apparently a destination, but told the cab driver, stop at the CVS. I want to get out here. And the cab driver couldn't find her after that. The CVS did not end up being the place she was last seen. She was last seen, according to her husband, he found out about a sign-in at a Planet Fitness. And the Planet Fitness folks have the video, and they have the sign-in, and that's where she's last seen, June 11th. But June 12th, that husband reports her missing, finds out all these weird things about where she's been, and we don't see her again until June 17th when she turns up dead. Not far away, right? Really not that far away from the Planet Fitness, 6 miles away from home, but not even a full mile away from the Planet Fitness. And also not in a thickly wooded area, like there's a roadway nearby and a bridge area. So what happened? How'd she die there? I wondered if she'd been murdered and dumped there. 6 days, don't know how long she'd been alive in between the last time she's seen and the time that she's found dead. Don't know how long she'd been there. But the autopsy says a couple of things that are completely like I'm flummoxed. All right. So first of all, they said that there was no immediate cause of death that could be identified. Well, we got that information from the coroner a couple days beforehand, who said, I can't tell you everything right now, but from my initial look, it's just too hard to determine. Nothing outwardly obvious. That was what we found out last week before autopsy. Then the autopsy happens on Saturday. And wouldn't you know it, they say there's no immediate way to identify the cause of death, that the body revealed no evidence of traumatic injury, including no bruising, no lacerations, gunshot wounds, stab wounds, blunt force trauma, strangulation, or other external injuries. So this wasn't a violent murder. That's at least something we can gather, right? Cause of death remains pending because at this time they've got to do additional testing to figure out, okay, how did this woman end up dead in the woods, lying there beside sort of a 12-foot drop, which, 12 feet might sprain an ankle, but you're not going to die, right? So they're going to look into histological studies they're going to review her medical records, and they're going to do toxicology testing. I know you've got questions. What are histological studies? What's the tox? What are they going to do? Because, here's a woman who may have been on medication. She was at a mental health facility. She'd just been released before she vanished. So I've got answers for you, because Dr. Laura Pettler, one of my favorite guests who knows so much about investigating death, she's going to join me in a moment to go over all of this. And let me tell you, I've been in this business a long time, but some of the stuff she told me in the interview I'm about to play for you just kind of made me, gave me the willies. But I'm fascinated, because oftentimes when you find a body outdoors, the body tells you the story through the elements that it's been in. The insects, it's not just kind of gross. The insects literally tell a story. They can tell you time based on their cycle. And this is fascinating. Also, what's around her, the actual foliage, that can also help tell a story. So Laura's going to tell you all about that. And then she's going to tell you why Elena Moore's eyes could be the key to telling us how she died. I know. I was super fascinated. It's why my conversation was really in depth, and I was listening sort of like, silently and on the edge of my seat. So we're waiting on cause and manner of death. And you know the difference, right? The manner of death is, suicide, homicide, accidental, those kinds of things. Sometimes it's undetermined. But cause of death is, was it a strangulation? Was it poison? What was it that caused the death? And then the manner of death is how'd that person die? Did they die at the hands of another? Did they die in a homicide, man on man? Did they die in a suicide, did they die natural? Like that's the difference between cause and manner. And neither of those can be determined right now on Elena. So we still have to wait for the Lexington County Coroner's Office to get these additional tests, which could take weeks. We all know toxicology can take weeks, and I honestly couldn't even tell you how long histological studies take, but I guess somewhere around weeks as well. One other thing that we want to include before we go to Dr. Laura Pettler is that there is a police report, and thank you so much to Plunder True Crime for digging this thing out. You guys are amazing. The police report is interesting. It is how Elena Moore's husband shows up at a police department to report that his wife is missing the day after that she's actually gone missing. But you kind of see the machinations of him showing up at the PD coming to get his information. They call him a victim instead of the missing person a victim. It's all very odd, but they also call him a complainant. And then they also, weirdly, they call Elena the suspect. I thought that was weird. You're missing, but you're a suspect. Anyway, it may just be their terminology, but I'm going to get into that with Dr. Laura Pettler. But if you haven't seen my interviews with Dr. Laura before, she's a forensic criminologist and a death investigator, but she also has this outfit called Laura Pettler and Associates Death Investigations, and happens to be a sworn deputy coroner in, you guessed it, South Carolina. So the fact that we have a South Carolina autopsy, a very mysterious death that, could use a little investigating, given the fact that they can't come up with cause and manner of death right now, Laura is the perfect guest. Here's my conversation with her. Laura, it's great to have you on the podcast again. Thank you for joining Drop Dead Serious. I wanted to just ask you about Elena Moore and these autopsy results that came out, which are just inconclusive. For starters, I was just surprised that there doesn't seem to be anything outward that is a cause of death. Does that surprise you?
No, Ashleigh, and thank you so much for having me today. It's great to be back. No, it doesn't surprise me, especially in a case like this, because what Coroner Fisher stated in her statement on social media, which is what I've read. So I've not read an official report, because there isn't one yet. But she left the case open, meaning that she hasn't ruled for manner of death and cause of death. And it's important to recognize in South Carolina the way that the coroner's office system works. So Margaret Fisher's the elected coroner in that county. And so she then contracts with somebody, in this case, the autopsy location down in Charleston for bodies to go down there and have an autopsy conducted by a forensic pathologist. So once the forensic pathologist is finished conducting the autopsy, then they make recommendations back to the elected coroner or to the deputy coroner for manner of death and cause of death. In this particular case, they couldn't recommend a cause of death to the coroner for the death certificate because they have so much more work they need to do on the medical legal death investigation side of this case before they could possibly come to one of the 5 manners of death and a particular cause of death. So no, I don't think it's unusual at all. I think it's exactly right on target for what they say they found during the autopsy.
So, Elena was missing for a week. They ultimately found her body not very far away from where she was last seen. It was a wooded area, I think near a bridge. And by all descriptions, not to be too graphic, but it looked like she had been there for a bit, right? For a while. There might have been some decomposition activity that happened there. But ultimately, even a person who's been in South Carolina in June, where it's hot and humid for a week, you would be able to tell because they said no evidence of traumatic injury, including bruising, lacerations, gunshot wounds, stab wounds, blunt force trauma, strangulation, and other external injuries. So does that tell you that Elena was not progressed far in decomposition if they could tell all these things?
I don't know specifically, but I do know that it's been pretty hot there. Just my family has told me that because we're in, our ranch is in North Carolina, which is not far from Lexington. It's probably 90 minutes or so from Lexington County where this case occurred. And I know that it's been really hot there. And so the heat does increase decomposition and make it go faster sometimes under certain conditions. But the fact that they didn't find all the things that you listed demonstrates to me that there was still enough of soft tissue and the body being intact where they could examine her fairly thoroughly, if not completely thoroughly.
So if there had been an advanced state of decomposition, and again, we're only talking about a week, but yes, hot and humid.
Yep.
Would there be a circumstance like that you could imagine where it would be impossible to tell if there was strangulation?
Yes, there are lots of circumstances related to decomposition, whether it's in water, whether it is in a wooded area, depending on the terrain, the weather conditions, the humidity, the animal activity, the type of ground, leaves or soil or mud or all of these different things that are related to wilderness body discoveries. Yes, absolutely. There are cases where there is no cause of death and no manner of death determined because of the decomposition of the body. So for sure, there's lots of cases that happens, unfortunately.
I guess I've just been trying to figure out this mystery. She's seen on camera, disoriented, acting strange, and then she's just gone for a week and her body's discovered. And I just wondered, how long was she out there alive? And how long had she been in that location where they found her dead? They'll be able to assess that, right? Even with decomposition, they'll be able to figure an approximate time of death?
Normally they can. They also use something called the post-mortem interval, Ashleigh, and it's basically the way that the body decomposes plus the animal activity, which we call entomology in forensic science. And so they'll use like the actual larva of flies or beetles or ants or other types of insects because they actually all have a particular order of how they arrive and when they arrive to a decomposing body. So for example, when a body, any kind of body, it could be a cow, it could be a dog, it could be any kind of a body. When that body dies, a blowfly lands within like 5 minutes of that body dying because the body immediately begins to have a chemical change that's detectable by flies. So they're always first. And then again, like they just have like this order of how all of the bugs come into to basically feed off the body or help it decompose in one way or the other. And so they use entomology, they use botany, they use diatoms in water, they use all kinds of different aspects of forensic science to help determine what happened, where. Did it happen there or did it happen somewhere else? And was the body placed there after the fact? Or has the body been there the entire time? There's no signs of the body being moved. And of course, after being, say if she's there for a week and she had been there for a week, obviously rigor mortis comes in and out within 24 hours. So the body acts like a sac otherwise, where blood settles into aspects of the body. So they would be able to use what is called fixed livor mortis if it's still present in the body, or other aspects that, depending on how long it's been there, could help them determine how long the body's been there. Was it somewhere else prior to being discovered in that location? And what an approximate day and time of death would be, which is a very multifaceted determination based on lots of different factors. Not just, a lot of times people think you just walk into a scene and you can like take the temperature of a body or look at the body and be able to tell time of death. And that's not always the case for coroners or other type of medico-legal death investigators. They have to use it from a multimodal standpoint, from medical records, last seen, who was with them, and then, of course, the different medical aspects of the body combined.
Well, that makes perfect sense given the fact that the report, the autopsy result report, suggests that because the cause of death remains pending, additional evaluation is needed, including histological studies, review of medical records, like you just mentioned, and toxicology testing. So I know what toxicology is, and I was very curious about that, given the fact that Elena had had some mental health issues that she was dealing with, perhaps medications, perhaps this is afoot, a misuse, a mistaken use of medications. But I was curious about the histological studies. Walk me through what that is.
So histological studies are samples of the organs that a forensic pathologist removes from different organs. They kind of, depending on the organ, they harvest a sample of it for particular tests. And it's standard. It's a standard thing that we do in the autopsy process, where they take the slices or samples of the organs, and then they send it to the laboratory for analysis. And that will be then coupled with the toxicology, which is, of course, poisons and chemicals and medications, things like that, found in the vitreous fluid, which comes from inside the eyeball, which really, for me, the eyeball fluid, vitreous, is it was always a good marker. I always felt like the vitreous fluid held a lot of good information. And as you know, I'm not an MD, but having worked with pathologists so many years in this, I've always felt confident about vitreous fluid, giving a good read for doctors to interpret. So that's a really important one. And then, of course, you have urine analysis, you'd have blood analysis, coupled with the analysis of the organs themselves. And then you relate them back to the victimology and the medical records in a case like this, and try to see if you can make heads or tails of all of the results of all of those things in totality.
Like a big puzzle. I got to go back to the vitreous, because you're taking me back to 9th grade science. I think I studied the eyeball with the vitreous humor, but I did not know that the toxicology is taken from the vitreous. Is that the standard? I always thought it was a bodily fluid or blood of some kind that was tested for toxicology, but you're saying it's the eyeball fluid?
Yes, it can be. It can be vitreous. It can be blood and urine. So a lot of the autopsies the reports, of course, that we get here at Laura Pettler & Associates, in death investigation, cases I've worked over the past 25 years, they they often take the eyeball fluid, the urine and blood, and send all of that for tox.
By the way, it makes me wonder, and this is a bit of an aside, but since it's a podcast, I'm allowed to do that. When you die and you mark on your driver's license that you're an organ donor, you probably don't have anywhere to say, I'm fine with all of these tests. But legally speaking, this is automatic, right? Like these are investigations that have to happen, regardless of what you have felt in your living life. If you are a suspicious death, these things have to happen to your body, don't they?
It depends on the state a lot of times. Like it depends on the state law. And so in South Carolina, the coroners by county, I'm a sworn deputy coroner in Lancaster County, and have been for a very long time, other than a brief period where I was a private investigator in South Carolina. And the coroners there, who I've worked with mostly in my period of time in South Carolina, they decide whether or not they're going to order an autopsy. So there's some cases where they don't, and then there's obviously like absolute cases where they will. Like in Elena Moore's case, they're definitely going to order an autopsy because she was a missing person prior to her being discovered. But in some other cases and other states, actually, sometimes these types of deaths, it's left up to the coroner system. Sometimes there's no coroner system, and it's a medical examiner system like North Carolina, two totally, completely different systems. And you might get a police agency that doesn't order an autopsy. And so it really varies from sometimes from county to county in a coroner's office state, and various ways of doing it in a medical examiner's office state.
And
Two totally different systems.
Do family members have the right to come in and say, oh, you can't do that. You can't go in and, take that vitreous humor from the back of my wife or my husband or my daughter or my sons or my whatever from their eyeball. Given the fact that usually family members are the first people you have to look at, do they have any say over whether this kind of behavior happens during an autopsy?
They might have some say in natural death or in a non-violent, non-criminal investigation. But if there would be potential for any type of criminal investigation, you would definitely want to have every test done possible, because it leaves a hole open for interpretation. Well, this wasn't done, especially like in cases where sometimes families do not want autopsies, exactly like what you're saying. They don't want the body cut apart. They weren't organ donors, like you were talking about organ donors. Some people donate long bones of their bodies. They donate eyes. They donate other organs and things like that. And some families do say, no, we don't want any of this. We're going to cremate the body. We don't, for whatever reason they, feel, they don't want it. But in other cases, where there may be a pending criminal investigation by a law enforcement agency in South Carolina, such as a police department or a sheriff's office or SLED, which is the South Carolina Division of Law Enforcement Division. They're going to do everything that they can, especially down in Charleston. They do excellent work down there. They have excellent forensic pathologists down there. And they do excellent work.
Question for you. Elena Moore is 39 years old, fit as a fiddle. She's a personal trainer. Mm-hmm. It just seems such an odd story that she just disappeared and suddenly is found in the woods. It's not like there's some very high bridge beside her that she might have jumped off if she wanted to take her own life. There doesn't seem to be any kind of topography around her that would lend itself to that kind of death. So I'm just sort of trying to get into the death investigator's head to figure out what would be your first, your first rabbit hole that you'd want to go down with this particular story.
For me, me, I'm going to use a scientific process to make sure that we do this extremely thoroughly, that every stone is overturned and we're not missing anything, so that the family has less questions than more questions, because when investigators walk into a scene like this and stop doing their jobs, that leaves the door open for a family to remain in agony for years with unanswered questions. And that is something we always want to avoid. And most people in this field, they definitely do not want that. So for me, the victimology is first and foremost within the past 30 to 90 days prior to death in this particular case. So I would be looking at that very, very heavily. And of course, that does include medical records, as Coroner Fisher mentioned. The second thing would be the timeline to build, to flesh that out. Because the reason the story to me sounds so weird right now is because we're coming in at the end. There's actually like so much more going on here. And that's why I'm saying like a victimological study for probably the last 90 days is warranted in this case, which in Lancaster County is standard. Our Coroner Deese, a lot of our things that we do there are standard for us, that she requires victimology in all of her cases. So not everybody does. And then the behavioral elements of what we're seeing now will be more easily explained once we study the victimology for the past 90 days. And of course, that includes conflict with other people too.
The victimology is ripe for study because there's a lot of very unusual behavior when it comes to Elena Moore in the days and weeks leading up to her death. I want to take you back actually to June 4th, because that was the day that she was seen on a neighbor's Ring camera. It was a very unusual encounter. She followed a DoorDash driver as the DoorDash driver put food down and backed up to take the photo. Elena sort of moved right in and picked the food up as though she seemed to be the homeowner. And the DoorDash driver assumed this must be the homeowner coming home at the same time I'm arriving to deliver the food. So the DoorDash driver took the picture and moved on. And suddenly the homeowner actually opened the door. And there's Elena standing with her food. And the homeowner now assumes Elena's the DoorDash driver. It was a very strange confluence of circumstances, but Elena almost wanted to follow inside. And it was just awkward and unusual. And the homeowner closed the door, but then later saw Elena rifling through packages at a neighbor's house. I want to play for you, Laura, an EMS dispatch that we found. And it's to the Lexington Medical Center, and it is after this incident that happened on the Ring camera with the DoorDash delivery. Let's take a listen.
Lexington, Medic 22.
Medic 22, this is Lexington, go ahead.
Lexington, Medic 22. We're heading down to your facility, non-emergent this time, with an approximately 30-year-old female. Chief complaint tonight is going to be signal 12, with a heavy emphasis on paranoia. Cells are within normal limits. Negative SI or AI, but patient has been observed reacting to internal stimuli. We have about a 10-minute ETA.
You have some vital signs for me?
I apologize. I had you turned down. What was your last?
Do you have vital signs on this patient?
Negative right now. I'm having a call from the cab while they're keeping her calm.
10-4, Lexington, clear.
So a couple of things that stood out there. Number one, it was a female somewhere around 30. Elena's 39, but she looks really good. She's a personal trainer. And this is a signal 12, which in this jurisdiction means threatening suicide. And there's a heaviness on paranoia. We do not know if this is Elena Moore, but this is not a huge area. And we do have this very bizarre behavior of this 39-year-old woman right before this dispatch. Does this sound awfully coincidental?
It could be. It definitely sounds like whoever's they're calling about needs to have a medical evaluation, you know. So the ring camera footage is bizarre, you know, as far as it's not normal. And it makes me think, you know, is there a psychological issue, a medical issue, a neurological issue, some type of intoxication? Or, of course, if you're dealing with a psychological issue or a psychiatric issue, that would include paranoia as well. So, you know, it could be related to Elena Moore.
They also mentioned, and again, just to be clear, we don't know if this is Elena, but it sure is right around the time of a very unusual encounter with these residents nearby. The dispatcher says that she was responding to internal stimuli, which we checked in with one of the investigators from another adjacent county, Vicki Rains, who said that usually means that she's either having delusions or she's imagining something or saying that something hurts on the inside that you can't see on the outside. Does that all sound about standard for these kinds of calls?
Yes, absolutely. It does. It absolutely does. It sounds like a medical crisis of some kind.
But then also non-emergency.
Right. So that, you know, they're saying that she's not maybe in a position where they feel like she's harmful to herself or others.
So I guess they're taking her to the hospital, and I have no idea what transpired afterwards, and I can't find out either because of HIPAA laws, but it just seemed extremely coincidental that this happened right after the moment where these people had this woman who was acting strange, was very flushed. Elena's cheeks were so red, almost like she'd been outside in the heat running or something, you know, when she was at that doorway. So then there's this other aspect of what happened with Elena. And again, what we just played was from June 4th. That's a week before she vanishes.
Okay.
But on June 12th, the Lexington police have an incident report. It came in at 9:45 in the morning. And the report identifies her husband, Brannon Slice, as the complainant/victim. I don't know if there's a victim here, but that's how they're categorizing complainant/victim. And they say he's 6 feet tall, 255 pounds. And it identifies his wife, Elena Catherine Moore, as the suspect. Says she's 5'7", 120 pounds. And the report says, the report is the police officer saying, I was advised there was an individual in the police department's lobby that wished to file a report for a missing person. And so I guess when you have somebody who's a complainant/victim, it's a little weird to call the person who's just reporting a missing woman as a victim, but that's effectively what happened. And, you know, that's sort of the last time that anybody really saw her. What he said was this, and this is super key. He said that his wife had been released from the blank on June 11th, and we learned that she had recently been released from a psychiatric institution, a mental health facility.
Okay.
Prior to 2:00 in the afternoon. It goes on to say that what appears to be the medical facility had provided a taxi for the subject, for his wife, which stopped at her request at the I/L. And to my knowledge, that's incident location, I/L. So
Okay.
she makes a request to stop at a location that ends up being the incident. And this is the last time the subject was seen by the cab driver, who attempted to make contact with her within the store where they stopped after she had not returned outside. The victim, meaning the complainant, that would be Brannon Slice, the husband, said that the subject, meaning his wife Elena, had been known to frequent the area of Planet Fitness. And he was able to make contact with the Planet Fitness. A Planet Fitness employee advised the victim that his wife, the subject, her information had been used to sign in at that location at about 6:38 on the evening of the 11th. And after those incidents, no one had further contact with Elena. It's all very strange because I believe the incident location was a CVS. So
Okay.
if we're to understand all of this, it appears that Elena is released from a psychiatric facility. She is provided a taxi. She gets in the cab. She directs the taxi to stop at a CVS and never comes back to the taxi. Her husband then comes to the police station, tells them all of this, says he learns about a Planet Fitness sign-in, and they go from there, but she's not seen again until she's like, been on the news, and others come forward saying that a week prior to all of this, the weird behavior had happened, at the DoorDash location of a neighbor, not far away from the Planet Fitness, but 6 miles away from her home. As a death investigator, what do you make of all that? How do you put that into the puzzle?
So, yes, I mean, all of those things have to be sorted out completely. And wow, that's quite a bit. So the timeline is going to be critically important. What we call like a macro timeline of like these major milestones. Like she's 39 years old. She possibly appears to be in some type of a medical crisis that required hospitalization in a at least for some type of an evaluation, if nothing else. And maybe it was that she went and spent a short period of time there. She was observed, and then they couldn't hold her, or she didn't choose to stay, or there was some other legality for why she was released. Then gets in this cab, and so then we would want to tighten that timeline up quite a bit, Ashleigh. Like it's pretty loose right now with lots of missing information per minute. And so once you get down to the day of death, we go from, 0000, which is, when the clock turns at 12 midnight, all the way to 23:59. And we need to fill all that in. And so I hear, I think you said 6:38 p.m., which would be 18:38. So we have her marked at 18:38. We have her marked at 2 p.m., which would be 1400. We have to account for all the rest of those hours. Maybe not the hours that she was still in the hospital, but definitely between 2 p.m. and 6:38, what happened all that time. That's critically important in the timeline. And then, of course, she's not seen. So there would be Planet Fitness footage from her leaving that location.
Which they have.
After she checks in and scans her QR code, then, when did she leave? And then where did she go, after she left? She sounds like she may be disoriented or experiencing a continual medical crisis.
What I cannot understand is how somebody who, if this is the subject of the June 4th EMS call about the woman who's in paranoia, who's like a possible suicide, and I don't know that that's the case, but it is the day that the weird stuff's happening at the DoorDash door. And if she goes to a facility from the 4th until the 11th, right?
Okay. Yep.
How on earth does a facility put someone like that in a taxi? Or how does a family member put somebody being released from a mental health facility into a taxi by themselves, where clearly shit went sideways after they, put her in a cab? It just did not work out. What could possibly go wrong in a scenario like that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people. When I was very young in my career, I worked for the mental health hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina. And there were lots of people that came in through the ER there that literally just walked in off the street there in the city. They didn't have any family. There was nothing, some people, they didn't even know who they were, or the police would bring them in. And they were completely, psychotic. They had no idea who they were, or they were severely depressed. There were all kinds of things. They would hospitalize those people. And then when they were released, some of them would go through like a social work system where they would end up becoming like in a supervised sense, or they wouldn't be released to just on their own. And then some of the people, they were just released on their own, and taxis would come pick them up. So that is normal sometimes in different places.
Here's why I can't believe it. Here's why I absolutely cannot believe that happened with Elena Moore. I've had my wisdom teeth out, and they wouldn't let me get in a taxi after that. You know, how many times have you gone in for some minor procedure where you've had some kind of an anesthetic and they
Yeah.
will not allow you to go home by yourself?
So
You have to
true.
have a family or member or somebody, a
Yes.
friend has to pick you up. This is why I just thought, what facility puts a woman like that into a cab? Because that in itself may have led to her death.
It sounds like she was in charge, of her own decisions. It sounds like, she wasn't going to be in a supervised role or something like that. And somebody provided that cab for her. In that report, I believe you said it was redacted.
Redacted,
But
but it might be the facility.
yeah, it could be the facility. They provided the cab, and then maybe she didn't have anywhere to go or didn't understand where she was going. There are so many different factors that go on in the healthcare system. So it all we could do would be to speculate at this point, why that happened that way. Because as you mentioned, we're not going to be able to know due to the privacy laws.
Yeah, best guess on what on earth happened here. I mean, she vanishes, she's fit, she's 38, she's disoriented, she comes out of a facility, she goes to a Planet Fitness, and then she's never to be seen again until they find a body a week later. And nothing untowards appears to be out of sorts. This is not a classic, attack and murder. What's your best guess on what happened here?
I think one of the other things to mention is the psychology, the forensic psychology of lost person behavior. Lost person behavior is very interesting. Sometimes when you have people who are lost and they're lost for a period of time, like Elena was missing, you mentioned, for about a week. Sometimes if they get into a situation where they end up dehydrated or they end up some other way in a disoriented state, they can hear people calling for them and they don't reach out. They don't respond. Sometimes they hide. Especially if she is in a medical crisis, especially a psychiatric crisis, she may not respond. And so I think lost person behavior, because it sounds like she is maybe disoriented and she is maybe potentially lost in her own mind. She knew where she was when she went to the Planet Fitness, but then after that, she just goes completely off the radar, from my understanding. So I think, the lost person behavior plays a role, but from the death investigation side, how is this lost person under the circumstances going to behave? Because lost people behave totally different than regular people because they're under stress. Did she go into the wooded area and become lost and go, I don't know where I am?
It's not that far. I mean, there's a roadway nearby. That's why I kept wondering, I've always thought about the folks on Everest who become oxygen depleted and confused, and then they're hot and they take their clothes off and they die of exposure.
Yes.
But there's an explanation that makes sense to me for that.
Right.
When you're a few feet away from a roadway and you're in a city, I can't understand if it's possible that she died from exposure, just basically stopping any kind of survival instinct and just staying in one place until you die. Is that possible?
I don't know, because I'm not an MD, so I don't know if that's possible. It could be due to dehydration, but there's lots of other types of homicide that may not just be obvious. And then of course you have all your natural causes of death, like poisoning, that may not be obvious, or some type of drug intoxication, that may not be obvious. At a death scene, you'd have to send the body to toxicology, and that's happened many, many times throughout my career where we're looking at someone and we're going, well, I'm not really sure, so let's send them for autopsy and toxicology and see what evidence the body can provide. And then, of course, there's stroke and cardiac issues and all kinds of other things that could occur as well if she's disoriented, confused in the woods. So this sounds like some type of a medical case to me right now, some type of a crisis case, but I can't be sure at this point. The investigators, I'm sure, are doing all of these things to determine, first, of course, cause of death. That's going to be critical. And sometimes that can take a while, with different tests. I don't know what the standard of wait time is right now for toxicology and for histology in South Carolina, but it does vary somewhat. And then, once the coroner gets that information back, then to consult with those results with the toxicologist, the histologist, and the forensic pathologist, and coming to an agreement or a suggestion, as it's done in South Carolina, for the coroner to rule an official cause of death. This is how this person died. We're sure of it. We have the science to back it up. And therefore, the manner of death is one of the 5, including undetermined. It can be undetermined. I don't think that that's as likely, because they have medical records. They have a person getting out of the hospital that same day. She would have had vitals taken there. There's all kinds of, it appears, a tremendous amount of documentation. And then, of course, she was married. She had a husband or her partner who was reporting her missing. I don't know how long after she was missing she was reported. That would be very important to me as a death investigator, simply because I'm not ruling out less obvious causes or obvious types of homicide. Just because the body might rule out trauma and very obvious, what we see normally in homicide cases, that doesn't mean that it can't be manner of death homicide in using other type of mechanisms. And then, of course, accidental death. That is a strong possibility in this case due to a medical condition or something like that. Of course, you could not rule out suicide either. And you still can't rule out natural. So the coroner's office is right on target to leave this open until they get all the results from everything.
Well, however long it takes for the tox and the histology, let's meet back here once this mystery is solved. Dr. Laura Pettler, I always love talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashleigh. Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
So there you have it. Great conversation with Dr. Laura Pettler. I learn so much every time I talk to her. And some of it is just, it gives you the willies, but it sure is fascinating. I'm going to keep watching this case, and I will get you up to speed when those results come in. Again, it can usually take a couple weeks, but once that toxicology comes back, I think maybe we will have more to this story and hopefully some resolution, certainly for her family. Honest to God, this is an incredibly sad story, and they deserve that kind of closure, if there is even such a thing. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and also don't forget, the truth isn't just serious, it's drop dead serious.